Hello everyone, welcome to the video, and today we're going to be talking about the explosive cannon build for Elden Ring. But before we get into the video, I would like to ask you guys to not only drop a sub here, but to like this video if you found it helpful and you like the build. Also, if you have any recommendations for another build that you want me to make, just comment below, and the comment with the most likes, I will make that build. So with that being said, let's get right into the video. So obviously the first thing I always talk about is the equipment. So for our main hand and our main damage dealer, we have the Jar Cannon +9. This does incredible damage, and I paired it with the explosive bolts. They're very good. They do a lot of damage. And then we have the Red Branch short bow. It could literally be any short bow as long as you have a short bow that has the fast shooting, and then I use blood arrows for it. As for the fashion, we have the Knight's Cavalry helmet, Sanguine Noble robe, and Malekith's gauntlets and greaves. And for the first talisman, we have the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman. This boosts your physical damage negation. I run it on all builds. Incredibly useful, great for defense. And then we have the Shard of Alexander, which greatly boosts the attack power of his skills. Since the skill of your short bow is going to be shoot fast, it's going to help out a lot and boost the damage. And then we have the Arrow Sting Talisman. This gives you a 10% boost to arrows and bolts damage. Pretty self-explanatory. And then we have the Ritual Sword Talisman, which boosts attack power if your HP is at maximum, and since you're going to want to always have your HP at maximum since you're going to be far away, this gives you a nice little boost to damage. Then for our Wondrous Physic, we have the Explosive Physic. So for both of these tiers, they cause an explosion, and this is a large part of the damage, and it's honestly what makes the build so fun. So for me, this is a definite necessary part of the build because you just pop it and run at people and do insane damage, as you saw in the beginning of the video. But now we're going to take a look at the stats. So I am level 145. I have 60 Vigor, 30 Mind, 45 Endurance, 40 Strength, 20 Dexterity, 14 Intelligence, 6 Faith, and 9 Arcane. Now, I ran out of larval tiers, so I was not able to respec. However, if I was able to respec, I would subtract 10 from Mind, making it 20, and put that into Endurance. And then I would probably subtract points from Dexterity as well, and put those in Endurance too, because I felt like I didn't have enough endurance for this build, because you need an incredible amount of endurance to be able to shoot the short bow as many times as you need to. So now I'm just going to play a couple clips in the background and just talk about exactly how this build is supposed to be used. So for me, I always like to summon in the Spirit Ashes just because it's another person shooting and it is very nice. But for the actual cannon, I like to aim for the face. Now there is some subtracted damage if you use the explosive arrows, just because the explosion doesn't do as much damage as a headshot, so there's not as much of a multiplier there. But I always aim for the head because honestly it's fun and it's pretty funny to watch. But as you can see here in a lot of these clips, I'll get the enemy pretty decently low and then just run at him with the Wondrous Physic Flask, and it does insane damage. I actually have a lot of PvP clips at the end as well, and in all of the PvP clips, you know, 90% of my kills are just me running at the person with the flask activated and doing incredible damage, and usually just one-shotting them straight up. And it's honestly, this build is very fun to use. I had a lot of fun using it, especially in PvP. I was able to kill a lot more people than I thought I would be able to. So honestly, I would say that this build is pretty viable. As for like killing final bosses and stuff, maybe not, but you might be able to if you are very used to the build and using it for a long time. And also you could optimize it a little bit more than I did. Like I said, I was not able to respec again because I really only had one level tier left for this playthrough, and I could have respec'd and changed the build up a little bit, but then I would be stuck with this build and I would have had to have fought the last boss with it and then gone through all of New Game Plus with it. So now we're going to talk about a couple of the downsides of the build. Obviously it doesn't have incredible damage, and it takes a very long time to shoot the cannon. So like I said, a major downside of the cannon is the fact that after you shoot it, it takes such a long time to reload, and overall enemies can close the distance and hit you very easily and punish you for that. So it's definitely a major drawback of the build, but you can play around it. As well as with the short bow, if you don't want to get hit and you feel like an enemy is going to be running at you soon, you could always use the short bow, switch to that, it shoots very quickly and you're able to get in and out a lot easier. Another drawback of the build would be the Wondrous Physic. If you use this, it does take a little bit of your health away. You don't want to use it when you're too low of health, because in a lot of these PvP clips I was pretty low health and I just kind of ran at them and ended up killing myself too in the process, which is definitely not ideal, but overall it's pretty funny, and like I said, this build is so much fun to use. So now I'm going to talk about a couple of the things you can trade out for the build. So one of the things is you could put in a great bow. I was using it a little bit but decided on the short bow. And obviously you definitely want to have the explosive cannon because it does AoE damage and can hit for almost up to 1900 per hit. So it does incredible damage, but a couple of the arrows you can choose between. If you want to go like a little bit faith oriented, you can use the lightning great bolts. Those are pretty solid for the cannon as well. They also do AoE damage. And also for the arrows, for the short bow, you can change them to Scarlet Rod arrows. They're a little bit more difficult to get, but you could farm them up decently easy. It just might take a little bit more time, and they could do Scarlet Rod damage to the boss while you focus on your cannon damage. So it can be pretty useful to run the Scarlet Rod arrows instead. For me, personally, I wanted to use the bleed damage just because I thought that it would be a little bit more effective. However, it is all personal preference, and if you are going to be going a full bow build and wanted to kill serious bosses, I would definitely invest in the Scarlet Rod arrows because they are probably going to be much more useful for bosses with tons of health. So another thing I would change about the build would definitely be the endurance. So I talked a little bit about this before, but there's actually two reasons to why I would want more endurance for this build. And one of them, like I said, is because it takes a ton of endurance to rapid fire the short bow. It takes a lot of endurance in general when you're in this archer build because you have to run around a lot, you have to stay away from the boss, it costs a ton of stamina to shoot as well, so you just want to make sure you always have a lot of stamina. Also, the other part of it is that the cannon weighs so much, so I actually wasn't able to have a lot of heavy armor, and thus making my survivability much lower. So that's one of the reasons why I would also like higher stamina, is because I'd be able to wear heavier armor and be able to take a lot more hits. So definitely if I was able to wear heavier armor, I would put on something like the Tree Sentinel armor, or something that gives me a lot more physical defense and poise, just so I'm not being thrown around a lot and one hit. You could easily swap out some of the talismans I have, like maybe the Alexander Great Shard one, because you actually don't need that for the cannon part of the build, because the cannon doesn't actually have a special ability. The only special ability that it has on it is the kick, so it's actually not really useful for that, but I just use it for the bow primarily. So if you didn't feel like having the Alexander's Shard talisman on, you could very easily go for the range one, which actually increases your damage, since a lot of bows scale off of the range, and there's a lot of damage fall off the farther away you are. So by increasing distance, you're also increasing damage. So it is actually a solid substitute for the Alexander's Shard. But that's pretty much it for today's video. I think I covered pretty much everything about the build. Like I said earlier, if you liked this video and you enjoyed the build, make sure to drop a like and sub to the channel. I make tons of builds, as well as if you want to see a specific build, the build that is commented below with the most likes, I will be making in the future. But that's pretty much it for today's video, so thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time.